Hey, it's Strybear. With Last Epoch Season 2 launching this week on Thursday, April 17th, I wanted to ask and answer a very important question. Which class should you play for Season 2? Now, I'm going to come at this from the perspective that you are someone who either hasn't played Last Epoch before and you're just getting on the hype train and you want to check out the game for Season 2, or you tried it and they launched last year in February, over a year ago, and you haven't touched it since. I imagine if you're someone who's been playing Last Epoch hardcore, you kind of know what you're going for, at least what your league starter is going to be for Season 2, but I kind of want to take this from a higher level because keep in mind that with Season 2, a lot of the classes are being touched up or reworked. The Sentinel class got a major overhaul in all of its masteries. There are skills being reworked, a bunch of new crafting systems. So really what you should be doing going into Last Epoch Season 2, especially if you're a new player, is just kind of find the class fantasy or the idea you're looking for. So today we're going to walk through the 5 classes and the 15 masteries that come along with those classes to help you decide what you're going to start with and what you're going to keep interested in throughout the season, rather than trying to explain the overall meta or try to predict what it's going to be once all these massive changes go live. Now, before we dive into the classes themselves, I want to get a basic understanding for what's available to you in the game right now. The first thing is that there is a lot of freedom in Last Epoch. And what I mean by that is you can go into town and you can respec a lot of your end game activities if you'd like. If you want to go to your character, you can respec your class points. The general setup is that there will be a class and 3 masteries that specialize in a specific playstyle. However, as you go into late game, you can borrow from the 2 masteries you didn't choose to gain benefits from them, but the main mastery gives you kind of your general direction for the character overall. However, if you don't like this, you can very easily respec your tree, change up your build as much as you want. And what's even cooler is you can also respec your skills, you can rework anything, and with Season 2, the launch of, they're allowing you to change your mastery as well. So say you're running with a class that you think is really cool, you try one of the masteries, say you're running with an Acolyte and you try Warlock, it's not for you, and you want to try Necromancer, for example, you will be able to respec your mastery along with all of the points that go along with it and your skills as well. So don't be super pressured to make the perfect choice right out of the gate. The other thing that I want to tell you about is just how much modification there is in the game as well. So once you choose the very basic of the class and work your way towards the mastery and start building your build, you will be able to, through the Weaver tree, through your ability tree, through your class tree, through all the different endgame systems, be able to modify and specialize your build even further, and in some cases can make some rather dramatic changes to the ability itself. So for example, you might be able to change the element of a spell that the mage casts. A good example here is Wandering Spirits. You can change it into poison instead of the necrotic damage that's there. So you can actually have some modifications built into the tree itself. So don't feel like if you pick like Forge Guard, for example, you're forced into a pigeonhole. You actually have a lot of freedom to play around with different ideas, modifying the skills and twisting it to your own fantasy that you're trying to play out. Moving on to classes, there are 5 main classes to choose from. The Mage, which is basically Tywin Lannister, Rogue, Primalist, Acolyte, and Sentinel. And then from those 5 classes, each of them have 3 masteries that you'll choose from that kind of pushes your build in a direction and gives you a little bit more flexibility and theme with what you're trying to create. Now, when you're on the character creation screen, you'll choose between these characters, and when you click on them, you'll be able to preview the masteries here. Keep in mind that you won't be selecting your mastery right out of the gate. It will be part of the story progression process. It's relatively early on in your progression, so you'll start as the base class and be able to unlock the mastery as you go along. And again, as I mentioned earlier, with the mastery system, you will specialize in what of the masteries, but you will be able to borrow from stats and bonuses you may want from the other masteries that come along with that as well. But again, on character select, even though you're not choosing the class here, you will still be able to preview what the theme or idea or abilities are with that class mastery. So let's dive into the list. We'll just go left to right here, starting with the Sentinel. Now, this is going to be the class that got the most changes going into Season 2. So if you played with the launch last year, or you've done any of the cycles along the way, Sentinel is receiving the most changes overall. I think basically every area of the Sentinel got touched up, and for good reason. There were a lot of complaints in Season 1 for Forge Guard and Void Knight specifically, and just some quality of life stuff for Paladin that will be going in that'll make it a lot better. And I think that hopefully all the changes that are going in here are going to make it feel really good. But the base class of Sentinel is your Paladin style, your your armor style, your holy magic knight style character that has a lot of defensive options and kind of fits into that spin to win warrior armored character. Because if you look at the lineup here, we don't really have any that are like really the big armor clad character. So Sentinel is your base there. You have some cool things with being able to spin to win and charge. They also made some changes to shield throw as well to kind of like bounce them around and play around with it as well. And I think some of the changes that are coming in for Void Knight and Paladin specifically should make a lot of these things feel really strong as you're going through. But if you like that kind of tanky play style, then Sentinel's going to be a great pickup here. Now, the Void Knight is probably one of the few that is going to be the most changed for the Sentinel class. So it's hard to kind of refer to what the Void Knight was before. However, it seems like they're sticking with the theme. They're going to get, you know, it seems like it's more mobility than say Forge Guard or Paladin, and focused a lot on being able to do large AoE damage and lean into the powers of the Void to be able to take out the enemies that are on your screen. And it kind of fills that basic need to do like the Dark Knight style. I think a lot of the builds will probably end up going two-hander for the Void Knight, but they are adding a lot of mobility with this as well, just to give it more flexibility and be able to move around. This is older footage from Babbling Bike, a build that he had worked on in you know, previous version, the season 1. But I think you get a lot of really cool AoE and Dark Knight file Death Knight style vibes from this, and they do have some really cool combinations they can pull in. I think also Forge Guard and Paladin have some early on stats that they can work into the build that make it feel really cool. So if you like the idea of having more of the Death Knight, Dark Knight style, then Void Knight should be an easy pickup, now more so than ever, because it definitely had a struggle bus experience in some of the points and some of the cycles in season 1, but a lot of reworks and buffs are going into Void Knight with season 2, which might make it a very easy pick for a lot of people. Next up is the Forge Guard, and this is one that I tried really hard in season 1 to make work. There were definitely some viable builds, especially around summoning swords or even just your armor construct that you could create and things like that. But it's definitely probably the mastery choice that has had the most uphill battle throughout season 1, but they also are getting a bunch of really cool changes going into season 2. I think shield throw is going to be a lot stronger. They also have some really cool changes for Forge Strike and with the summoning of the additional weapons. But Forge Guard kind of fits into that idea of being a blacksmith master. They have a bunch of summons that they can create with manifest armor, or being able to use the base Sentinel things like multi-strike or summoning swords. They have some really cool options for gameplay that I think set them apart from most other masteries in the game. They also just have some cool ways to play around with equipped gear and the modifiers that come with it. So if you like kind of like the iron golems from say like Diablo 2, or you just like the idea of playing around with some of the forgery aspects that come with this, it's one of the more unique specs in the game to play around with, and with the changes coming in, hopefully is in the best state that it's ever been in. But one of the builds that is shaping up to be pretty spicy is the use of Forge Strike, which allows you to summon like these weapons that float and follow you around. And there's plenty of different ways you can have them attack multiple times. You can spawn multiples of them. You can see with like a Forge Guard build, you can have these summoned armaments that come along with you, floating swords, manifested armor, and flames, and these big flame strikes that come from it as well, which I think create a really cool aesthetic that you won't get with any other mastery combination. Next up is Paladin. It is one of the few masteries that I just haven't really put a lot of hands on for. I really spent a lot of time trying to make Forge Guard into my own and kind of playing around with Void Knight, but Paladin is that very specific Holy Knight, Templar, you know, heavily armored cleric style gameplay that comes along with it. And they're also getting some reworks. Sigils of Hope is getting reworked a little bit as well. And there's some like very heavy quality of life changes to how the Paladin functions that should make them feel like a dream in season 2. And I think what makes Paladin so appealing for a lot of people is the sheer flexibility you have in how you implement the build. You are very much capable of dealing a ridiculous amount of damage with Paladin. You can also create a large amount of survivability, healing, and utility, especially if you play with other players or you want to play with a combo or duo or something like that. So you have the option to play with it for Paladin there, but you also have the ability to just do some ridiculous damage. You have your classic Hammered In, your smites, your AoEs, things like that, and it just kind of creates this, like, I feel like it fits that Diablo 2 aesthetic of Paladin so unbelievably well, and it's only getting better in season 2. Next up is the Rogue, which is a very well-known archetype archetype, the rogue, the assassin, the thief, the one that sits in the shadows. But they kind of blend together the rogue archetype with also like ranger, archer, huntsman, that sort of thing. So the base rogue is going to have a lot of abilities that play off of either a bow or like daggers, melee attacks, shurikens, things like that. They have great mobility and a lot of ways to get around the battlefield, but the playstyle of the rogue really comes online depending on the mastery that you choose. You have Bladedancer, Marksman, or a very unique playstyle with Falconer. Let's start with the mastery choice that I think a lot of people are going to resonate with just because it is that kind of age-old style, the Bladedancer. This one is going to be a combination of all the thief, assassin, rogue style gameplays that you have on top of it. You have the ability to teleport, blink, misdirect, things like that, and use the shadows to your benefit. The core of it feels very fast, and again, you have ways to go invulnerable, to avoid attacks, to teleport and blink around. You have crazy bleed builds, you have flurry builds, all kinds of assassin style builds. So if you like the really fast, like melee dagger style, you'll definitely get a lot of a kick out of the Bladedancer in general. They also have some really cool burst damage as well, and some unique ways to keep themselves alive compared to some of the other classes, which are a little bit more straightforward. And we also know that HP or health builds are getting better in Season 2 as well, so hopefully that opens up new avenues as well for characters like the Bladedancer. Next up is the Marksman, which is your ranger, archer, hunter, range style class. They do have some elemental things to apply to this as well, but they do have like a lot of your kind of quintessential like multi-shot hail of arrows is so classic for an archer style class like this. However, they are getting one of the new skills in Season 2, the Heartseeker, which is this kind of, it's almost like Guardians of the Galaxy where you can whistle and the arrow moves around. It has a lot of logic around how it bounces between targets. And because of this new ability, I think a lot of people have their eyes on Marksman for at least the start of Season 2, just because this kind of crazy like curving bullet that ricochets. It's like a heat-seeking, wanted style, air-bending, chain lightning style, multi-hit style attack that can go around corners and bounce between targets and hit the same target multiple times. So this Heartseeker is kind of like a big, a marketing point for them. So if you want to do the new hotness and you really like ranged style, archer style classes, you may want to go with the Marksman and play around with some of the new toys they have this season. The last mastery for Rogue is the Falconer and is a super unique gameplay style. It kind of reminds me of Quinn from League of Legends, but it's basically you are a rogue style class, but you play along with a falcon. And because you play with a bird of prey, you have ways to send the bird in for attacks and dive bombs. You have ways for it to pick you up and move you. And so you basically play as this in tandem play style with the falcon that creates a very unique gameplay experience that you won't find with other classes. And again, because you can tap into the other classes for modifications to your build, you'll have a lot of really cool ways to bring in potentially Bladedancer or even having the Marksman playstyle into your Falconer. But again, one of the reasons I like this just for the visual aesthetics, you have like these feathers and thorns, and you have this falcon flying around, all these effects. It just creates a very unique experience and perspective. And I think if you're someone that likes playing rogues, thieves, hunters, archers, rangers, I think you should give Falconer a shot because it kind of opens up a new avenue that I think is relatively novel for that archetype. Moving on to the Mage. The Mage is one that I spent a bunch of time with in Season 1 that I liked quite a lot. So you have a kind of like the theme you're seeing with these masteries is that there is the right on the nose theme archetype that you would get from this class, and then a couple of variants that are relatively different. So the Mage is your spellcaster. They will be able to use a range of elements: lightning, ice, fire, and again, as I mentioned earlier, you can go into your skills and modify those and change how they function, and you can borrow from other masteries as well. So Mage kind of has that casting down to a point, very high burst damage, and plays more is that kind of like squishy glass cannon style that you can play around mobility, placement, and really heavy magic damage at its base. And then your three choice offerings for mastery are Sorcerer, Spellblade, and Runemaster. Starting with the first mastery, Sorcerer, this I feel like has to be in any RPG that is in the fantastical or fantasy style theme. It's just your quintessential caster. You have things like Meteor, Static Orb, Ice Barrage, Arcane, and then Black Hole. So like if you're looking for that like age-old quintessential caster, wizard, sorcerer, sorceress experience, then Sorcerer is going to hit that to a T. Now, there's definitely some overlap with your two masteries, and there are places where people will use the playstyle of the other masteries in place of Sorcerer, but in general, you can go with a Nova playstyle, a multi-element playstyle, pure lightning with lots of like arcing and jumping between targets, or big explosions with things like meteor and everything in between. But again, if you want your pure caster experience, Sorcerer should have that in spades. And you'll have a lot of customization on which direction you want to go. And keep in mind, you can also respec as well. If you go Fire Sorcerer and you really want to go Ice Nova Sorcerer or Multi-Ultimate Sorcerer or Meteor Sorcerer, you'll be able to play around with that by respecking later on. But this is your kind of like straightforward caster. Next up is Spellblade, and one that I had a ton of fun with in Season 1. I actually really like Spellblade, but Spellblade is, as the name would suggest, it is a caster that also utilizes melee. And so not only do they have the ability to enchant weapons and things like that, but they also have a lot of high mobility for a caster and some melee range spells that will do some crazy effects and some CCs on them. So if you're looking for a like higher mobility, almost like a rogue playstyle, but with more of like an arcane or spell driven aspect to it, then I think that Spellblade is a huge pickup. It is a little bit more complicated to understand how to deal with properly, and generally has, at least in my experience in Season 1, a little bit more of a survivability question on how to position. But once you get it right, I think it feels really good, and it can, again, you can lean on some of the core casting of Sorcerer, but Spellblade I think is a ton of fun. I don't want to turn anyone away from the specialization, but it is one of the few that I feel like I really had to kind of sit down and figure out how I was going to use it. And there's just so many different directions to go, and hopefully in Season 2 things really click for the Spellblade. But when they work, when you have a build that works and you really put the time into it, I feel like Spellblade is super satisfying and gives you a wide range of experiences. You can play from like medium range if you wanted to, you could play high mobility melee if you want to, you can even mix in burst magic to go along with it as well. I think that Spellblade is one that you should keep your eye on, and hopefully if the challenge doesn't scare you away, I think it's one that is worth, it has a very high level of satisfaction once you get it online and working. Last up for the Mage is the Runemaster, and if you've ever played Dota 2, this is basically Invoker in a lot of ways. Reminds me a lot of Invoker. And so if you've ever played Dota 2, it's basically this idea that you can create your own spells based on the choices that you make. So they have their kind of claim to fame is Runic Invocation, which is when you cast other spells, it will store the sequence of spells that you casted into this invocation, so you can use a series of spells, and then you can use Invocation to combine the last spells you casted into a new kind of spell. So you can actually create a large list of different kinds of spells by combining them together. It's definitely one that is different than any other playstyle you'll have here. I know I say that a lot, but I feel like there's always at least one mastery for each of the classes that is just super unique and different. And I feel like with this one, it definitely has that kind of vibe to it. You obviously, if you want to, you can mix in some of these other modifiers, but I have things like Rune Bolt, which will play off of their rune system, elemental effects like Flame Rush or Frost Wall, and then really it's kind of playing off this invocation idea, being able to combine spells together into new ones. So you can see by the spells above the character's head what your previous sequence was and how you combined them together. And it's really kind of hard to explain in short terms what your flexibility options are with the Runemaster and how you combine your spells together and everything. And I think Runemaster also started as one of the newer classes, kind of like Falconer at the launch out of early access last year, but also just has so much depth to it that I think that if you're really looking for, again, a nice challenge, but in a conceptual sense, not necessarily like a mechanical sense like the Spellblade in that way, it's more of just like the possibilities of what you can do with it are just absolutely ridiculous. Next up is the Primalist, and this is basically a combination of like the Shaman from World of Warcraft and a quintessential Druid archetype. They have tons of things that I think borrow from World of Warcraft Shamans, not like in a bad way, obviously. They have totems that they can spawn, and they have like Maelstrom strikes, and they have tornadoes that they can spawn, and earthquakes and avalanches and lightning strikes that bounce between them, which I think kind of brings that all together. Their three masteries are Beastmaster. In this case, you will be summoning different pets. You can see that the four of the 5 skills that are unique to Beastmaster are just summoning different pets, and you can make them do different things. You can even turn them into different things later on in the game. Shaman is more of your, like, it's almost like an enhancement elemental shaman from World of Warcraft. It is very melee focused. You can do dual wield or two-hand, and you can combine together things like Maelstrom Strike and Tornado and elemental effects, as well as totems on top of that to bring it together. And the last mastery is my favorite of the Primalist options, is the Druid, which not only gives you kind of druidic aspects like entangling roots and summoning things, but also more importantly, it has 3 different transformation states. And you would think that it's like wolf and bird and stuff, but they have some pretty unique ones. So the first one is Werebear, which is a big bear transformation, which gives you some nice AoE and some survivability. But they also have Spriggan form and Swarmblade form, which is a little bit more insectile and more melee focused. And the Spriggan form has some really cool, like more of like the summon Spriggans or like thorns. Last season I played a Primalist that used the Thorn totem with Spriggan form, so there's just thorns everywhere flying all over the screen, which is super cool. So if you like that kind of aesthetic, then Primalist is a great choice. Starting with the first mastery, let's talk about Beastmaster. As you can see, again, you can summon a raptor, a bear, a saber-tooth, or a scorpion, and there's ways to transform these into other animals as well. This, in my experience, starts out a little bit weaker because your companions don't scale as well early on, but later on gets into a crazy ferocious playstyle depending on which animal style you're playing or what your like army of nature is going to be. Now, to be honest, there's a wide range of options you can play with. There's like the Storm Crows, you can go pure raptor. There's even like Beastmaster totem builds that have some nice flexibility in how you implement them. There's also just some like kind of combinations with the other masteries that make it feel really strong. But I think if you're liking the combination of like true Beast Lord or Beastmaster fashion of you are strong, your companions are strong, and you can combine those together into a pure attack pattern, depending on how you customize your build and your skills, I think that is a very popular archetype that honestly feels like it's very underrepresented. It's almost like since the days of EverQuest 1 that we really just, sometimes I feel like when Beast Lord or Beastmaster gets touched by RPGs, ARPGs, or MMOs, sometimes it misses the mark, and I definitely felt like the beginning of Season 1, Beastmaster did miss the mark, but going into Season 2, I think Beastmaster is looking very strong. Next up is Shaman, and again, if you've played World of Warcraft, this is basically an enhancement Shaman from World of Warcraft in many ways. It has the elemental options, it has the base things like Maelstrom, totems, melee attacks, buffs, and things like that, but they also have some additions of elemental things like Earthquake, Avalanche, which you can change the element on as well, or you can just pure Storm Totem. I think I played a Storm Totem build for my Shaman last season, which felt really good, but you can also play around doing like large tornadoes and elemental effects. So if you wanted to play more of an elementalist style with the Primalist, then Shaman is the way to go, because Druid is going to be focused more on summons and transformations. Beastmaster is going to be focused more on your pets, though not entirely, you can play around with, but Shaman is going to be more of you being the damage dealer, either through your weaponry choices or through your elemental focus or some combination of the two as you put them together. Now again, most of what I've seen is around like Storm Totems or combinations between those just because it scales so well for the Shaman, but also played a lot with Avalanche last season, which I got feeling pretty good towards a certain state that really just kind of came online. So you have tons of options between the combinations, but if you really want to play that elemental focus and have some leaning into summons and things like that, there's a tons of flexibility in the build for Shaman to really feel strong. And it's not pure enhancement Shaman too. You can definitely play at range if you wanted to for a Shaman Primalist build. You can play pure melee focus on your weaponry or a combination between the two if that's what you're looking for. And lastly for the Druid is, or lastly for the Primalist is the Druid. And you have some major changes in the direction you want to go here. Usually what you'll see from Druid is either a focus on Werebear, Spriggan, or Swarmblade. A lot of these, I played the most with Spriggan myself just because I think there's some really cool builds you can do with it, but I've seen some Swarmblade builds do absolutely ridiculous things, some cool combination builds with Werebear with some of the other like base Primalist setups that you can get like Warcry or Swipe, and then you also have the ability to summon Spriggans and play with nature-based elements on top of that as well. And honestly, I think that Druid got more and more popular over the course of Season 1, and I hope to see a lot of people try out Druid in Season 2 as well, just to see what they can do with it. There are a lot of new options with the idols that you can equip and the different gear you can get from the Woven Season mechanic that I think will make like perma forms and states for like the Druid set up really, really nicely and have some crazy top-end options for the damage that they deal as well. Lastly on the block is the Acolyte, and this is your Dark Caster, your Warlock, Necromancer, Lord of the Undead, that sort of thing. So you actually will get, for the base class of Acolyte, you'll get a whole bunch of theming around summoning minions and harvesting their souls and doing curses and blood attacks and things like that. And your 3 mastery choices for the Acolyte are Necromancer, focusing on summoning minions and constructs, Epochs, Lich for transforming into the Reaper form, which is super fun, actually my favorite playstyle from Season 1, and then Warlock, which is kind of like a blend between the base Acolyte and some of the options you get here. So they have a lot of curses and chaos damage and things like that, so Warlock plays off of that quintessential forbidden arts, like going the Dark Tide kind of vibe for Warlock in general. But let's start with the first mastery, Necromancer. If you're looking to summon things, you can see a lot of these are summoning. So you have in the base Acolyte tree, you have Summon Skeleton, but you also get Summon Wraith, Summon Skeletal Mage, and the Abomination on top of that as well. And you can get quite a lot of minions in Last Epoch as well. Now I know that minion playstyles, minion answers, summon answers, and summons in general have always been a very popular archetype for a lot of people. And I'm not going to sit here and say that this is like super original, but they do have some new ideas that flex along with as well. You can control your minions, you can direct your minions. In general, they are very snappy and responsive, and they're able to react to things. You can make them super tanky, you can make them deal a lot of damage, and I think in general, Last Epoch has done an excellent job of making that archetype fit and feel really good. On top of that, you can still use Acolyte abilities or share abilities from other options and combine those into your playstyle. You can focus on just being a commander of an army, and you can also just focus on either doing pure golem abomination gameplay or huge army of skeletons and mages and rangers and warriors that put all of it together as well, and pretty much all of it is viable going into Season 2. So if you really like that summon answer, Necromancer is going to be an easy pickup for you. Next up is the Lich Mastery, which is probably my favorite playstyle of Season 1 across the board. I just love the way that they did Lich. Now, Lich in general is usually a like dark undead energies thematic, but what they focus the Lich around in Last Epoch is this idea of Reaper form, which is not just a transformation like you'd see with the rage mechanic from Druid, but it actually is something that will gain a damaging, like your health regen does not apply, your health decays over time. And so this is kind of like, if you really like the Archon form from Diablo 3, or you just like those kind of momentum-based playstyles that focus on maintaining a state for as long as possible with major negatives but huge upsides as well, then Reaper form and Lich is going to be a big choice. So your goal is to use the basis of this Reaper form to create chaos everywhere. There are some that focus on melee and dashing. You can even use some minions in this build as well. You can use more like of the build up here, but you can see that when you're in the Reaper form, your HP changes, constantly drains, and if you lose it, you jump out of your Reaper form. So you're kind of incentivized to position properly and use your damage. You can go pure poison, pure necrotic, spell casting, melee, gives you a lot of options, but I personally always love that kind of momentum-based playstyle with the better you play, the faster it gets, the stronger you get, the worse you play, the more you're punished, and it has that kind of dichotomy to it. Lastly is the Warlock Mastery, again, more focused on curses and like the bad jujus that come along with this kind of Acolyte style. They do boast Chaos Bolt, a Fissure, Ghost Flame, which is super fun, Profane Veil, and Soul Feast, but they also play a lot of like the core like curses and things that you can get from the basics of Acolyte in very different ways. They can play kind of like a caster if you want them to. You can play more like a dark cursing, debuffing burst character, and everything in between. I think we've seen a lot of burst options and caster options for the Warlock. I've seen people use Warlock with some minion builds as well and some modifications there. You really kind of play off the curses to debuff the target and then burst them down while you have it up, but everything I've seen from Warlock kind of gives you a choice to make on how you want to implement it and how it's going to focus. And that's it for Last Epoch Season 2. The video is quite long, but I wanted to kind of just give a run through of all the classes and masteries that are available in the game, and hopefully this gives you an inspiration or direction to go in on what you're going to start with in Last Epoch Season 2. And one of the big things that I like about this is because you have so many customization options for the gear. You can go with a really cool trading system or a really awesome SSF system with their kind of like you get your own gear style. On top of the fact that you can respec your mastery in Season 2, you can respec all of your skill points, you can respec your trees, and the new mechanics allow you to customize your build even further, that you really just kind of pick something that you think is really fun and interesting, and you just ride it out throughout the season and just see what you can make of it. But let me know what choice you're making for Season 2 of Last Epoch down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.